When someone dies, their body begins to shut down and various biological processes start to take over. This is all part of the process of dying. But what happens next? Is there anything that happens after your body gives up that we don't know about or can't see? Once the heart stops beating, the brain is deprived of oxygen very quickly. Instead, some parts of it remain active for some time after death. One thing that happens in the brain after death is that the neurons begin to die. Consciousness is what makes us aware of ourselves and our surroundings, and it's something that we take for granted until it's gone. When someone dies, their consciousness ceases to exist. One of these is the loss of muscle control. As the brain begins to shut down, the muscles begin to relax. This can cause the arms and legs to become limp and the body to go into a fetal position. It's important to note that this is not the same as being paralyzed. The person is not consciously aware of their surroundings, and they cannot move because the muscles have relaxed. Another change that occurs in the rest of the body is the loss of bladder control. The bladder is an organ that stores urine, and it's controlled by the nervous system. When the nervous system shuts down, the bladder loses control of its sphincter muscles. This can cause urine to leak out of the urethra. This is not the same as being incontinent. The person is not consciously aware of their surroundings, and they cannot control their bladder because the muscles have relaxed. This means that they are no longer aware of anything that is going on around them, and they don't feel anything. Death is a complicated process, and there are many things that we don't understand. However, we are learning more about what happens to the body after death every day. If you want to learn more about what happens after death, be sure to check out our other videos on the subject. Thanks for watching. It also means that they can't think or reason or make decisions. Essentially, they are in a state of nothingness. Another psychological change that occurs in the brain after death is the loss of identity. As mentioned earlier, the cerebral cortex is the part of the brain that is responsible for things like reasoning and rational thought. It's also the part of the brain that is responsible for our sense of self. When this part of the brain shuts down, we lose our sense of self. We no longer have a sense of who we are or what our place is in the world. Instead, we are simply a body with certain reflexes. This can be a scary thought, but it's important to remember that death is a natural part of life. It's something that everyone experiences, and it's nothing to be afraid of. Neurons are the cells that transmit information in the brain, and they need oxygen and nutrients to survive. The first of these changes is the cessation of blood flow. Blood is pumped by the heart throughout the body, and it brings oxygen and nutrients to the cells. When the heart stops beating, the blood stops flowing and the cells begin to die. This process is called ischemia. As the cells begin to die, they release enzymes and other chemicals into the bloodstream. This can cause the blood to become thicker and more viscous. As the blood becomes thicker, it becomes more difficult for it to flow, and this can cause clots to form. Clots are simply blocks of thickened blood that can form in the arteries and veins. They can be dangerous because they can block the flow of blood to vital organs. However, in most cases, clots are not the cause of death. Instead, they are a response to the death of the body. Once the heart stops beating, the body is no longer able to provide these things to the neurons, so they begin to die. The process of neuron death is called apoptosis, and it's different from necrosis. Necrosis is the death of tissue due to disease or injury, while apoptosis is a programmed form of cell death that occurs when the body is no longer able to maintain homeostasis. Apoptosis is a normal part of the life cycle of a cell, and it's actually beneficial for the body because it helps to remove old or damaged cells. However, in the case of someone who has just died, apoptosis can cause some strange things to happen in the brain. For example, it can cause the neurons to begin firing rapidly. This is called an epileptic seizure or a kind of seizure, and it can cause the person to convulse. This can be due to the lack of oxygen or it can be due to the release of certain chemicals in the brain. It's unclear exactly how long these seizures can last, but they eventually stop. They don't mean that the person is coming back to life, though. They're simply a result of the complex biochemical processes that are occurring in the brain during the dying process. Now, this doesn't mean that the brain shuts down immediately. In fact, the brain remains active for around 15 seconds after the heart stops beating. Neurotransmitters are chemicals that are used by neurons to communicate with each other, and they're responsible for things like mood, sleep, and concentration. When someone dies, the levels of these neurotransmitters become imbalanced, which can lead to a number of strange effects. For example, it can cause the pupils to dilate, the eyes to roll back in the head, and the limbs to become stiff. It can also cause the person to drool or make strange noises. These are all simply reflexes caused by the body as it goes through the dying process. During these 15 seconds, some interesting things happen in the brain. First off, the cerebral cortex, which is the part of the brain responsible for reasoning and rational thought, shuts down almost immediately. However, other parts of the brain remain active. And one of those parts is the brainstem, which controls vital functions like breathing and heart rate. The brainstem stays active for a few seconds after death, which might result in a few gasps for air. Interestingly, sometimes after this initial period, the brainstem also shuts down, meaning there is absolutely no activity in any part of the brain. However, other times, the brainstem stays active for some time, which causes the post-mortem gasp reflex. This reflex results in the person making a large inhalation movement followed by an exhalation movement, often with a snort or a puff of air escaping from the mouth. Sometimes this can happen once, but other times it can happen multiple times. It can even be mistaken for hiccups. This reflex is controlled by the medulla oblongata, which is located in the brainstem. It normally works to control breathing, but it's not entirely clear why it causes the post-mortem gasp reflex. Some think it has to do with the body trying to inhale and use oxygen before death, while others believe it's just a reflex that happens due to the nerves being stimulated. Whatever the reason, this reflex usually lasts no longer than a minute, and then the muscles relax. In today's video, we are going to talk about exactly what happens right after you die. So stay tuned. It's no secret that when someone dies, their heart stops beating. It might continue for a few seconds, but very quickly it will stop. As mentioned earlier, the brain doesn't shut down immediately. Another thing that happens in the brain after death is that the levels of certain neurotransmitters become imbalanced. In addition to these physical changes, there are also some psychological changes that occur in the brain after death. One of these is the cessation of consciousness. In the minutes after death, the body undergoes a series of changes that are designed to preserve the body and prevent the entry of bacteria. In addition to the changes that occur in the brain and the circulatory system, there are also some changes that occur in the rest of the body. These are just a few of the things that happen right after you die.